They told me Grandma left me nothing. No money, no house, not even a photo. Don't get your hopes up, my stepmother said. The will doesn't include you. My name is Grace Walker. I'm 24, work full-time at a grocery store, and rent a tiny apartment above a laundromat. I've never asked for much. I just wanted to belong. But in this family, I was always the extra piece, the reminder of a past they tried to erase. They said I wasn't really Thomas Walker's daughter, that my real mother was just some woman who died too soon. They said Carol, my stepmother, was doing me a favor by keeping me under her roof. I believed them. So when Grandma Eleanor passed away 6 months ago, I didn't even try to attend the funeral. They made it clear I wasn't welcome. She was the only person who ever showed me kindness, and now even she was gone. And apparently, she'd left me nothing. Then one morning while eating cereal before work, my phone rang, unknown number. Is this Grace Walker? A woman asked. I'm calling about Eleanor Walker's will. Have you ever been told you don't matter, then found out someone never stopped believing in you? Stay with me. This story isn't what they expected. Grandma Eleanor passed away quietly. 6 months ago. No warning, no goodbye. I found out through a neighbor, not my father, not Carol. They didn't even call. I wasn't invited to the funeral. They said it was just for a close family. I guess that didn't include me. It hurt, more than I let on. Grandma used to send me birthday cards when I was little. She'd slip in a handwritten note, a soft $20 bill, a heart drawn in red ink, but then the card stopped. The calls stopped. I thought maybe she forgot, or maybe she stopped caring. Now I know. She didn't. That phone call on a random Tuesday morning came from a law office. The woman on the other end was calm, professional. Grace, she said your grandmother left something behind. I'd like to meet. My heart pounded, but I didn't dare hope. They had already told me I wasn't in the will, that there was nothing for me, so I asked carefully, are you sure you have the right person? And she said, yes. Eleanor Walker was very clear. She wanted this to go to you and only you. I couldn't breathe. What could Grandma have possibly left for me? The law office was small, quiet, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and polished wood. I sat across from Margaret Cole, the woman who had called me. She looked to be in her 60s, neatly dressed, gentle voice, the kind of person who didn't waste words. She slid a thick envelope across the desk. These are the documents from your grandmother's estate, she said. Grace, you are her sole heir. I blinked. I think there's been a mistake, I said softly. My family told me I wasn't in the will. Margaret gave me a long, knowing look. Your father and stepmother are not your legal guardians anymore, she said. They don't control this. She opened the folder. Slowly, deliberately, inside were property deeds, bank account statements, investment portfolios, and one check written to my name, $2,100,000. I stared at it, couldn't speak. My hands trembled. I don't understand, I whispered. Why me? Why only me? Margaret nodded gently, then reached into her briefcase. There's something else, she said. Your grandmother wrote you a letter. She asked me to give it to you in person. She handed it to me. My name was written on the envelope, in Grandma's delicate, familiar handwriting. Word count 225. My fingers shook as I opened the envelope. The paper was cream-colored, folded neatly. The handwriting, hers. Every letter felt like her voice whispering through time. My dearest Grace, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And that Margaret has finally reached you. I read slowly, word by word. I've tried to see you for years, but they made it impossible. Your father, Carol. They shut every door. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. You are not adopted, Grace. You are my granddaughter, my blood, the daughter of my beloved Hannah. I stopped breathing. Your mother died when you were 2, and 6 months later, your father married Carol. My eyes burned. Carol never wanted you. She wanted a clean start. No reminders. She asked your father to give you up. I covered my mouth. Tears blurred the page. I fought for you, Grace. I threatened court. I begged them not to erase you. They kept you because they had to, but they never truly accepted you. And I was pushed further away. The letter trembled in my hands. I wasn't unwanted. I wasn't some outsider. I was family. And they had lied. For years, I kept reading. I couldn't stop. Every cruel word. Every door slammed in your face. Every time they left you out, that was Carol's doing. And your father let it happen. I could see it all now. The missing birthday cakes, the silent car rides, the empty seat at Christmas. Not just neglect, not forgetfulness, intentional, planned. They told you that you were adopted so that they wouldn't have to treat you like family. But I knew the truth, Grace. I never stopped knowing. I pressed the letter to my chest. I hired a private investigator to follow your life from afar. I saw your studio apartment, your double shifts, the college classes you paid for on your own. She knew. She saw it all. I'd felt so invisible, so alone. But she'd been watching, loving me silently, even when I thought she'd forgotten. They've been telling everyone that the inheritance would be shared. They've spent money they didn't have. They're not ready for what's coming. I looked up at Margaret. She didn't say a word, just waited for me to finish. And there, at the bottom of the letter, was something that changed everything. Grace, I'm leaving everything to you, not just because you're my granddaughter, but because you're the only one in this family who has faced life with dignity. My hands tightened around the paper. No one had ever said that to me, not once. I saw you trying every single day, working nights, studying alone, eating ramen while they remodeled their kitchen. I remembered it too well. The week my fridge broke, I couldn't afford to fix it. Meanwhile, Carol showed off photos of new granite countertops. Your father bought a new truck. Carol redid the house. Dylan got a boat. Bella got a designer purse for her birthday. All of it spent in advance. Money they didn't have. Because they thought they'd be rich soon, they believed I'd leave it all to them. I let them believe it. Because I wanted you to have the last word. The last word. Not out of revenge, but justice. You deserve more than money, Grace. You deserve the truth. You are loved. You always have been. I stared at those final lines. No one's ever said that to me. Not my father, not Carol, only her, only Grandma. At the bottom of the letter there was a handwritten postscript. P.S. The house keys are in the safe deposit box. I hope you'll consider living there. It's been waiting for you, waiting for me. Not for them, not for the family that ignored her, but for me. Margaret watched as I folded the letter slowly. I could feel something shift inside. Not joy, not yet, but something like belonging. She slid another folder across the table. There's more, she said gently. Your grandmother documented everything. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Me walking home from work, me waiting for the bus, me standing outside the campus library in the rain. Timestamps, dates, notes in careful handwriting. She kept track of you, Margaret said. She wanted to be sure you were okay. I flipped through the pages. It felt like watching someone else's life, but it was mine. I'd spent so long thinking no one cared, that I didn't matter. But she saw me, not just once, for years, and now I was holding proof. She never stopped loving me. I closed the folder slowly. My chest was tight. It wasn't just the inheritance. It was everything I'd never been told. I looked at Margaret. What did they think they were getting? She didn't hesitate. They believed the estate would be divided evenly, she said. Your father especially, he was confident. I thought of the truck he bought last year. Brand new, flashy. Carol's kitchen white marble gold fixtures. Dylan's boat. Bella's luxury shoes. They didn't save a penny because they thought it was already theirs. They spent over $200,000 in the past year, Margaret continued. Your grandmother let them believe they would inherit everything. I raised my eyebrows. On purpose, she nodded. She wanted them to feel secure, to live beyond their means, so when the truth came, they'd feel it. I felt a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge. It was about revealing who they really were. They lied to you for years, Margaret said, but now they'll have to face what they've done. I stared at the check again. $2.1 million, a house, investments, and something they never expected, the truth. Margaret leaned back slightly, her expression softened. There's one more thing, she said. Your grandmother had one final request. I looked up. She asked that I be present when you inform your family about the inheritance. I blinked. She wanted you there. She believed the truth should have a witness. She knew what was coming. She wanted them to hear it from you clearly, directly. I didn't know what to say. For years, I avoided confrontation, kept my head down, tried to stay out of the way, and now I was being asked to walk back into the house that shut me out, to stand in front of the people who made me feel invisible, and say out loud that I was the one Grandma chose. What happens if they get angry? I asked. Margaret's voice was calm. They might, but it won't change anything. The will is legally solid, signed, witnessed, and certified by 2 medical professionals. I nodded slowly. My hands felt cold. Grandma knew they'd resist. She knew how they'd react, and she made sure I wouldn't be alone. She had planned this moment as carefully as everything else. It wasn't just about the money. It was about finally being seen, finally being heard. The next evening, I stood outside their house. The same 2-story home where I'd spent most of my childhood feeling like a guest no one wanted. Margaret was beside me holding her briefcase. I clutched the letter in my coat pocket, and the check, $2.1 million, folded inside my wallet. I hadn't been here in over a year. The last time was when I asked to borrow money for textbooks. My father said I was too old to be looking for handouts. Carol didn't even look up from her phone. The porch light was on, the driveway sparkled, his new truck parked perfectly, curtains drawn, lights glowing from every room. It looked untouched, comfortable, like nothing had ever gone wrong inside, but everything had. I hesitated at the door. Margaret gave a small nod. I rang the bell. Footsteps. Then the door opened. Carol. Her smile faded the moment she saw me, her voice sharp. Grace. What are you doing here? We need to talk, I said quietly. All of us. It's about Grandma Eleanor's will. Her eyes flicked to Margaret, then back to me. She stepped aside slowly. I suppose you'd better come in. We stepped inside. The air smelled like new furniture and expensive candles. The living room had been redecorated again. New rug, new paint, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a gallery. Dylan was on the couch scrolling his phone. Bella sat in the armchair laughing at something on her screen. My father Thomas was half watching a cooking show. When they noticed me, the room shifted. Carol cleared her throat. Grace is here about Eleanor's will. Thomas looked up, then noticed Margaret, her neat suit, her calm posture, the briefcase. His smile wavered. Right, he said, forcing a casual tone. Time to sort things out then. We appreciate you coming. Margaret didn't smile back. She simply said, I'm here on behalf of Grace. Not you. Silence. Bella lowered her phone. Dylan sat up straighter. Thomas glanced at Carol, confused, then back at me. Wait, what do you mean? Margaret opened the briefcase and pulled out the envelope. The same one I had held the night before. The estate belongs to Grace, she said evenly. She is the sole heir. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. Then Carol laughed, short, bitter. That's not possible, she snapped. Grace wasn't even family. Carol's voice was sharp, loud. She wasn't even her real granddaughter. Eleanor had no obligation to her. I felt my fingers twitch, but I didn't need to say anything. Not yet. Margaret stayed calm. Eleanor Walker made her intentions clear. Every document is signed, witnessed, and legally binding. Thomas stood up now, his face pale. There must be some mistake. She promised the estate would be divided among the grandchildren. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the letter, unfolded it slowly, held it in both hands. I learned something yesterday, I said, steadying my breath. I'm not adopted. My mother was Hannah Walker, Eleanor's daughter. Bella looked confused. Dylan frowned. After my mom died, I continued. Carol convinced my father to pretend I didn't exist, to erase me from the family. Carol's face turned white. She told people I was adopted. She told me I was unwanted, and you all went along with it. Thomas looked down, couldn't meet my eyes. This isn't just about money, I said quietly. It's about truth, the kind you can't hide behind anymore. Margaret nodded as if to confirm. No one spoke. They knew. Deep down, they always knew. Bella finally broke the silence. But what about us? She asked, her voice small. What did we get? Margaret glanced at her papers. Both you and Dylan received $5,000 each. Dylan sat up. That's it. His voice cracked. $5,000. What about the house, the accounts? All of it, Margaret replied, goes to Grace. Carol stood abruptly, her face flushed. This is ridiculous. We were the ones who took care of Eleanor. We visited her. We brought groceries. Grace hasn't even seen her in years. Margaret looked her in the eye. Actually, Eleanor documented quite clearly that you prevented Grace from visiting. She also noted that your visits were usually followed by requests for money. Carol opened her mouth, then closed it. Thomas stepped forward. We'll contest the will. This isn't over. You can, Margaret said evenly. But I should warn you, Eleanor anticipated this. The will is ironclad. She was declared mentally competent by 2 independent doctors. She signed in front of witnesses. It will not be overturned. Thomas's face collapsed. He looked older suddenly, smaller. I watched him, the same man who once told me I was lucky to sleep under his roof. Now, he had nothing to say. Because finally the truth spoke louder than he ever did. Thomas sank into the couch, his hands clasped, knuckles pale. Grace, he said quietly, you have to understand, we never meant for things to go this way. I stood still, watching him, this man who once told me to stop asking for pity, the same man who turned away when I cried as a child. Didn't you, I asked, because from where I'm standing it looks like you got exactly what you wanted. You erased my mother. You built a perfect little family without me in it. Carol stepped in, her voice sharper now. We fed you. We gave you a home. Doesn't that count for something? I looked around the room. The expensive furniture, the designer rug, the art they bought with money they thought was already theirs. You did the bare minimum required by law, I said. And you made sure I felt like an inconvenience every single day. No one argued. No one denied it. I reached into my pocket and held up the letter. This, I said, is the only thing in my life that ever told me I was wanted, and it didn't come from any of you. Their faces said everything. They weren't sorry, just surprised. Surprised that the girl they dismissed now held all the power. I looked at Thomas, then at Carol. They couldn't even meet my eyes. I let the silence stretch a little longer, then asked quietly, how much did you spend thinking you were getting it all? Thomas shifted in his seat. Carol crossed her arms. Neither answered. So I started listing. The new truck, I nodded toward the driveway. That was 70,000, Carol flinched. The kitchen remodel, marble countertops, custom cabinets. That had to be at least 40. Bella's head dropped. Dylan's boat for his birthday. 30,000, wasn't it? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. That's over $150,000, I said. Gone. Spent on a future you thought was guaranteed. Carol whispered something I couldn't hear. Thomas cleared his throat. About 200,000 total. I nodded slowly. You built your lives on a lie, one you were so sure of. You never stopped to wonder if it was true. Margaret stood quietly beside me, saying nothing. She didn't need to. I used to think I was poor because I wasn't good enough, I said. But now I see it wasn't about worth. It was about truth. And now the truth finally belongs to me. I turned toward the door. I had nothing left to say, but then Bella's voice stopped me. Grace. Wait, she said. You're really going to take everything? I paused. Looked back at her. The sister who never spoke to me unless she had to. The one who rolled her eyes when I walked in the room. The one who never once defended me. We're still family, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I let that word sink in, family. You mean like when you included me in family pictures, I asked. Oh, wait, you didn't. She looked away. Or maybe when you invited me to holidays, birthdays, trips, no response. Or when you corrected people when they said I was adopted. Silence, Dylan stepped forward. But the money, it could help all of us. You don't have to take it all. I looked at him. The money is helping all of us, I said. It's helping me. Because I'm the one Grandma Eleanor wanted to help. I opened the door. You want money? Get jobs. Take out loans. Figure it out. Just like I had to. As I stepped through the doorway, Carol called out loud, desperate. Grace, please, we made mistakes, but we're still your parents. Doesn't that mean something? I turned around slowly. Met her eyes for the first time in years. Not with fear, not with doubt, just clarity. Thomas is my father, I said quietly. And my mother was Hannah, the woman you all erased. Carol opened her mouth, then stopped. Her hands trembled fingers twisting her necklace. You're not my mother, I added. You're the woman who married my dad and spent 21 years making me feel like I didn't belong. Thomas stood behind her silent, just like always. You could have treated me like family, I said. You could have shown kindness, but you chose power, control, distance. Margaret placed a hand gently on my back. It was time. I gave the living room one last look. They were surrounded by all the things they bought with money they thought was already theirs. But now all they had left was each other, and the weight of every lie they told. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the one left out. 6 months later, I moved into Grandma Eleanor's house. It was quiet, set at the end of a long, tree-lined street, 4 bedrooms, a wide front porch, and a garden she'd tended with her own hands. I walked through each room slowly that first day. Sunlight spilled across the floors. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old books. In the hallway closet, I found a box. Inside were photo albums, heavy leather-bound, each page filled with memories I'd never seen, pictures of me as a baby, my mother Hannah holding me close, her smile so soft, so familiar. She looked like me. Family gatherings, birthdays, me on Grandma's lap frosting on my nose, moments that had been erased from my memory, but not from hers. She'd kept them all. In the study, I found another box, unopened letters, dozens, maybe more, birthday cards, Christmas notes, all written to me, all returned by Carol, never delivered. Some still had stamps, some were sealed, some had a single word on the envelope, Grace. I sat on the floor, surrounded by them, hands full of what I never received, and for the first time in a long, long while I cried. But it wasn't grief, not anymore. It was release. In the weeks that followed, I read every letter, one by one, each envelope opened slowly, each word written in her careful script. I miss you every day. I tried calling again, but no one picked up. I bought you a birthday present. Carol sent it back. I wish I could be there. Some letters were short, some pages long and aching, but every one of them said the same thing. She loved me. She never stopped. I found drawings I made when I was 5, pressed flowers, a lock of my baby hair, proof that I wasn't forgotten. I was remembered in secret. She had saved the life Carol tried to erase, and now I was living in the house she built, sleeping in the room she left for me, walking the path she always hoped I'd return to. The garden bloomed again. I started each morning there barefoot, quiet. Sometimes I'd read her letters out loud, just in case she could still hear. The silence felt full now, not empty, and the grief that once felt heavy was softer, like her voice, like her hands, like the life she always wanted me to have. I didn't touch the money at first. It sat in a new account untouched. $2.1 million, enough to change my life forever. But I wasn't sure how to begin. I still packed my own lunches, still double-checked every grocery receipt, still felt nervous paying bills even when I didn't have to anymore. It takes time to unlearn scarcity, even longer to believe you deserve more. But one morning, sitting by the kitchen window, I remembered something Grandma wrote. I hope this money gives you freedom. Not just comfort, freedom. And slowly I began to understand. She didn't give me wealth to spend, she gave me the power to choose. So I finished my degree, business administration, with a focus on community work, paid in full, no debt, no night shifts, no ramen dinners. Then I did something bigger. I started a nonprofit, one that helps girls aging out of foster care, girls who know what it's like to feel left behind, to feel like a burden, to be told they're lucky just to survive. I wanted them to feel what I finally felt. Not just secure, but seen. Because what grandma gave me wasn't just money, it was proof that someone believed I was worth investing in. And now, I wanted to pass that forward. 3 months after the nonprofit opened, my phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. It was Thomas. I hadn't heard his voice since that day in the living room, the day everything broke. I let it ring twice, 3 times, then answered. "Grace," he said quietly, I was wondering if you'd consider helping us. We're behind on the mortgage. The bank is threatening foreclosure." I said nothing. He kept talking. "We made mistakes. I know that, but it's still our home." Home. The word stung, because I'd lived in that same house for years and never once felt at home. "I don't handle financial requests directly," I said. "If you want to discuss money, contact my attorney." "Silence, Grace," he said again. "You're really going to let us lose everything?" I almost asked him, like you let me lose everything. But I didn't. I ended the call. No yelling, no anger, just a clean end. That's the thing about truth. Once you finally speak it, you don't owe anyone the silence that came before. 3 months after the nonprofit opened, my phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. It was Thomas. I hadn't heard his voice since that day in the living room, the day everything broke. I let it ring twice, 3 times. Then answered. "Grace," he said quietly, I was wondering if you'd consider helping us. We're behind on the mortgage. The bank is threatening foreclosure." I said nothing. He kept talking. "We made mistakes. I know that, but it's still our home." Home. The word stung, because I'd lived in that same house for years and never once felt at home. "I don't handle financial requests directly," I said. "If you want to discuss money, contact my attorney." Silence. "Grace," he said again. "You're really going to let us lose everything?" I almost asked him, like you let me lose everything, but I didn't. I ended the call. No yelling, no anger, just a clean end. That's the thing about truth. Once you finally speak it, you don't owe anyone the silence that came before. People sometimes ask if I kept the money out of spite, if I wanted revenge, to see them fall. But it wasn't that. It was clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for existing. I wasn't begging to be seen. I didn't want them to suffer. I just stopped softening their consequences. For years, I had carried their silence, their distance, their coldness, and still tried to be good, grateful, quiet. Now, I simply chose not to carry it anymore. The world didn't end. But theirs shifted, and I think that's what Grandma wanted all along. Not to punish them, but to reveal them. To give me a chance to stop shrinking. Some nights I still thought about Bella, wondered if she remembered the time I helped her with homework, or how I gave her my jacket when she forgot hers in winter. But she never reached out, not once. Maybe it was guilt, maybe pride. Either way, I didn't chase it. Healing isn't chasing the people who hurt you. It's choosing peace without their permission. And finally, I had mine. Signed in ink, stamped with love, given without apology. Spring came quietly that year. The garden bloomed just like Grandma said it would. Lavender, peonies, wild roses, she planted them all herself. Roots that still remembered her hands. Every weekend I hosted small gatherings. Girls from the nonprofit, young women just aging out of the system. No parents, no safety nets, just stories like mine. We cooked simple meals, laughed on the porch, shared memories both soft and sharp. One girl, Maya, asked me, "Do you ever wish things had been different, like if your family had treated you better?" I thought about it. The birthdays I spent alone. The way Carol used to introduce me as a distant relative. The nights I studied under a flickering lamp too cold to sleep. Then I looked around. At the house that finally felt like home, at the girls finding their footing, and I said, sometimes. But if they hadn't treated me the way they did, I wouldn't be here now, and you wouldn't be sitting at this table. She smiled, quietly, and I knew she understood. I hadn't lost a family, I'd simply built a different one that chose truth over comfort, one that chose each other. Some days I still woke up early, not out of habit, but out of memory. Memories of alarms set before sunrise, of rushing to open the store, of skipping breakfast to save money for gas. Now I didn't have to wake up early. But I did, because those mornings reminded me of how far I'd come. I watered the garden in silence, listened to the wind move through the trees, felt the sunlight touch the same steps I once ran up as a child. Back then, this house felt off limits. Now it was mine, fully, peacefully. Sometimes I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea and reread the letter from Grandma. The edges were soft now, the ink a little faded, but the words held. You are loved. You always have been. That sentence had rebuilt me, not with noise, not with grand gestures, but with truth, pure, steady, unshakable. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore, didn't crave their validation. I had something better, self-trust, the kind that only grows after everything else falls away. Starting over wasn't a curse. It was a quiet kind of strength. And finally, it was mine. I heard from a neighbor that Dylan moved back in with Thomas and Carol. The boat was gone. Sold under pressure, Bella was working 2 jobs, one at a cafe, one at a clothing store. The house they once called home still on the market. But what they lost wasn't just money. It was the illusion they had built their lives on, that they were entitled, that Grandma would always forgive, that silence would protect them from consequences. Thomas never called again. Carol kept sending cards for Easter birthdays, even Mother's Day, each one carefully worded, never asking forgiveness, just hinting at reconciliation. I never replied, not out of hate, but because some bridges aren't meant to be crossed again. Some were never bridges to begin with, just walls disguised as family. People asked why I didn't just make peace, why I couldn't just let it go. But peace without truth isn't peace. It's performance. And I had lived too long performing for people who refused to see me. Now I live differently. With honesty, boundaries, quiet joy, they had their chances. Over and over again, and they chose distance. Now I did too, only this time it was mine to choose. One afternoon, I found a photo tucked inside an old book on Grandma's shelf. It was small, faded at the corners, but the moment it captured stopped me cold. I was no older than 2, sitting in my mother's lap, Hannah. She held me like I was the only thing that mattered, and in that second I saw it, the truth, the love they tried to erase. Her eyes looked just like mine, soft, steady, not afraid. Behind her, Grandma Eleanor smiled, hands gently resting on both our shoulders. 3 generations, 1 moment. Everything I'd been told to forget right there in full color. I stared at it for a long time. Let the image settle into my bones, because for so long I'd been chasing proof that I belonged. And here it was, not in documents, not in bank accounts, but in love, undeniable, unposed. I framed it, placed it by my bedside, next to the letter, next to the life I was rebuilding one piece at a time. Some truths don't need to be shouted, they just need to be held, and in that photo I held more than memory. I held my beginning, the one no one could take from me ever again. I hadn't said her name in years, not out loud, not where anyone could hear. Hannah, my mother. They never talked about her. Carol erased her. Thomas avoided the subject like it was shameful, so I learned to keep quiet, to pretend I didn't wonder, to bury the ache of not knowing who she really was. But one evening as I sat in the garden, surrounded by the scent of lavender and late sunlight, I whispered it. Hannah. And the name didn't feel distant anymore. It felt like mine. Like something coming home. I started saying it more, in conversations, in stories, To the girls at the nonprofit, my mom Hannah she loves sunflowers. She had this soft laugh I wish I remembered better. Each time I spoke her name, it stitched something back together inside me. She wasn't just a photo anymore, or a name in an old letter. She was real, and through Grandma's love and the life I was rebuilding, I was learning to carry her forward, not as a loss, but as a part of me, a part that finally had space to breathe. For a while I wrestled with the word forgiveness. People kept bringing it up. Have you forgiven them yet? You'll feel lighter if you let it go. Family is family. But they didn't understand. Forgiveness isn't pretending it didn't hurt. It isn't forgetting. It isn't inviting someone back in just because they share your last name. Forgiveness for me was letting the weight of their choices stay where it belonged with them. I wasn't angry anymore, but I also wasn't going to reach for hands that never once reached back. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want apologies too late to matter. I wanted peace, and that meant walking forward without dragging their silence behind me. One evening, I sat by the fireplace, reading one of Grandma's letters again. In it, she wrote, "You don't owe anyone your healing. Just keep walking toward your own light." I folded the letter and smiled. Forgiveness wasn't a door I had to open for them. It was a window I opened for myself, to let the past breathe without letting it back in. And in that quiet space, I felt free. Not because they changed, but because I finally had. One quiet morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen in my hand. Not to journal, not to write in my planner, but to do something I hadn't done before. Write my own letter. Not to Thomas, not to Carol, but to Grandma Eleanor. I didn't know where to start at first, so I just began. Dear Grandma, I got your letter. Every word stayed with me. Every truth you gave me, I carry it like a light. I told her about the house, how the garden bloomed again, how the photo of me and my mom sat by my bed, how the girls from the nonprofit laugh on the porch every weekend. You gave me more than a second chance. You gave me back to myself. And I hope wherever you are, you can feel how deeply I thank you. I sealed the envelope and didn't write an address. I didn't need to. I placed it in the drawer with all her letters, the ones she wrote me, the ones I was never supposed to read. Now she had one from me, one that said, "I heard you, I believed you, and I'm living what you always hoped I would." Healing didn't come all at once. It came slowly, quietly, like spring after a long winter. It looked like folding laundry in a house that finally felt like mine. Lighting a candle in the evening and sitting in silence without fear. Cooking real meals, not just surviving on scraps and stress. It looked like walking into the nonprofit office and seeing girls smile when they realized they weren't alone anymore. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was small, steady choices, like framing a photo of my mother and placing it by the door. Like planting something new in the garden every Sunday. It was learning how to rest, really rest, without guilt. Without the echo of someone's voice telling me I didn't deserve ease. I started laughing more, not nervously, not cautiously, but with my whole chest. I started feeling joy that didn't ask permission. And maybe that's what healing truly is. Not fixing what they broke, but building something beautiful in its place. No more begging, no more proving, just living, fully, quietly, in a life that finally felt like mine. And every breath of it was earned. It was early evening when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most people called first. I opened the door slowly. Bella stood there. Her hair was tied back, no makeup, no designer bag, just her smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was finally seeing her clearly. She didn't say anything at first, just looked around as if trying to recognize the house she thought would one day be hers. "I don't want anything," she said quietly. I didn't know what they did. Not really. I stayed silent. "I was a kid," she continued. "They told me you didn't want to be part of us, that you were angry, that you left on your own." She looked at the ground. "I didn't stand up for you. I didn't even ask questions." Her voice trembled. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just thought you should know." Part of me wanted to shut the door, to protect the peace I had worked so hard for. But another part, The one Grandma nurtured in every letter told me to listen, so I opened the door a little wider. Not fully, but enough to say I'm listening now. Bella stepped just inside the doorway. Not far. Just enough. She held her arms close to her chest, like she didn't know where to place them anymore. "I thought you hated me," she said, eyes glassy. "I always wondered why you never talked to me at school, why you left without saying goodbye." I wanted to speak, but I let her finish. "They said you were angry, bitter. They said you didn't want anything to do with us." She took a shaky breath. I believed them, because it was easier than asking why you always looked so sad. The words hung in the air between us, and suddenly I remembered the little girl who once asked if she could borrow my crayons. The one who sat on the edge of my bed, quiet and curious. She hadn't lied, she just didn't know. "I didn't hate you," I said softly. "I hated feeling invisible." Bella nodded slowly. "I get that now." She wiped her eyes. "I don't expect anything. I just wanted to see you. Not the stories they told, just you." And in that small, honest moment, something unspoken began to shift. Not fixed, but opened. I led her outside. The garden was quiet, the sky turning gold. We sat on opposite ends of the porch. Not too close, not too far. Between us, the space where everything used to live, the silence, the stories, the years. "I thought this house would be mine one day," Bella said, half smiling, half sad. "Carol used to talk about it like it already belonged to her." I didn't answer. She wasn't asking for agreement, just truth. She told me Grandma didn't like you, said you were difficult, dramatic. I believed it. For too long. I looked out at the garden. "Grandma loved this place," I said. "Every inch. She built it for peace, for things to grow where they were once forgotten." Bella nodded. "I'm not asking for a second chance," she said. "But if I ever needed someone to talk to, would that be okay?" I thought of the locked doors I grew up behind, the rooms where no one listened, the way it felt to be outside everything. Then I looked at the empty chair beside me, and I said, "Maybe. One day." She nodded again. "Didn't push. Some healing is slow. Some fences are rebuilt, not with nails, but with stillness, and a little room to try." That night after Bella left, I sat alone in the garden. The stars were just starting to show soft scattered lights in the dark. I held Grandma's last letter in my hands, the one with the postscript about the house. "It's been waiting for you." I whispered into the night, "I wish you could see it now." The trimmed hedges, the clean porch swing, the laughter that sometimes fills these walls again. But mostly, I wished I could say thank you for believing in me when no one else did, for holding on to the truth when everyone around me was rewriting it. Thank you for watching over me from a distance when I thought no one even saw me. And I wished more than anything that I could sit across from you at this very table, tell you everything, let you see who I've become. But maybe you already know. Maybe every time I laugh without fear, every time I help a girl feel like she matters, every time I sleep without shame, maybe that's the thank you. Maybe that's what you wanted all along. Not flowers, not perfect closure, just this, a life finally lived in full light. People still ask me about the inheritance, what I did with the money, if it changed everything. The truth, yes, but not the way they think. It wasn't the house or the check or even the freedom from debt. It was the truth, that I wasn't abandoned, that I wasn't invisible, that someone somewhere had been fighting for me long before I knew how to fight for myself. That was the real inheritance. Not dollars, but dignity. Not luxury, but clarity. Grandma didn't just leave me money. She gave me back my name, my place in this family, and a story I could finally stand in without shame. I look around now at the garden she loved, at the girls I get to help, at the life I built, not out of anger, but out of the truth she left behind, and I realize this was never about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about coming home to something I didn't know I'd lost. She gave me that, with ink, with letters, with love that never stopped reaching for me. And in every quiet moment, I still feel it. Her final gift, the one I never knew I needed, until it was mine. A few months later, I got another letter. this time from Carol. Typed, formal, almost like it came from a stranger. We understand your position, but we hope you'll reconsider helping with the mortgage. It's still your father's home after all. No apology, no warmth, just expectation, like I owed them something for surviving them. I folded the letter neatly, set it aside. I didn't need to scream, didn't need to defend myself. I had learned that saying no could be quiet, calm, firm. It didn't make me cruel, it made me clear. For years, I had bent myself into silence just to keep the peace. Now I knew peace built on guilt isn't peace at all. I called Margaret, my attorney. File a response, I said. Short and professional. No further communication will be accepted. She didn't ask why. She already knew. Drawing a boundary isn't about punishment. It's about protection. And I had spent too long letting people who hurt me set the rules for how I should heal. Not anymore. This was my life now, and saying no was just another way of saying yes to myself. One Sunday afternoon, I wandered into the attic. The air was warm and still, dust floated through the sunlight like tiny memories. I hadn't been up there since I moved in. But something pulled me. In the far corner, beneath an old quilt, I found a wooden trunk. Inside, more of her things, a faded apron, a gardening journal of pages filled with notes about which plants liked shade and which ones bloomed best under moonlight, and a box labeled in her handwriting, "For Grace, when she's ready." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a small framed picture of me and her taken in the backyard when I was 6. I was laughing. She was looking at me like I was the only thing in the world. Beneath it, a note. I always hoped this house would feel like safety to you, not just shelter, but something that holds you back, not with walls, but with love. I sat there, knees folded, holding that frame like it was a piece of her heartbeat. This wasn't just a house. It wasn't a prize. It was her way of holding me even now. And for the first time, I let myself lean into that, fully, without fear. I placed the photo on the mantel that evening, next to Grandma's letter, next to the candle I light every night before bed. Not out of ritual, but out of quiet remembrance. People talk a lot about legacy, what we leave behind, what we pass down. For some, it's property, or money, or family names carved into stone. But for me, it's this truth that was almost buried. Love that refused to be silenced, and the courage to live differently. I don't need portraits in gold frames or fancy plaques on the wall. I have letters. Handwritten pages that saved me, words that found me when I didn't even know I was lost. And I have a house, not just full of memories, but full of new beginnings. The girls at the nonprofit often ask me, what do you want to be remembered for? And I always say the same thing. I want someone to say, she made me feel seen, even just once, because Grandma did that for me. And now it's my turn. Not just to carry her legacy, but to live it, every day, with both hands open. Sometimes I sit on the back steps at sunset, bare feet in the grass, a cup of tea in hand. And I think about how this all began. A phone call, a will I was never supposed to be part of, a truth hidden in silence for over 20 years. Everyone thought I'd inherited money, but they were wrong. What I really inherited was clarity, peace. A name restored. The 2 million changed my life, yes. But the truth, that changed me. For the first time, I know who I am. I know where I come from. And I know that I was loved deeply, even when I was told I wasn't. That knowing, it sits deeper than any check ever could. I still light the porch lantern every night. Still leave the gate unlocked for girls who need a safe place to land. And sometimes when the wind moves just right, I swear I can hear her Grandma Eleanor in the rustle of the trees, in the steady warmth of home. Her final gift wasn't wealth. It was something far more lasting. The power to begin again, with truth in my hands, and a life that finally belongs to me. If this story touched something in you, a memory, a wound, or a quiet hope, I'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what part stayed with you. And if you believe in stories that heal, that reveal, that remind us we're not alone, hit subscribe. There's more to come. More truth, more light, and maybe a little more of you too.